So I've created my own cooking competition show, which is sort of like Chopped, but with the goal of being a little bit more realistic for home cooks. But the kicker is I'm the only contestant on this show, and all of you are the judges. Now, the way this competition works is I pick out $50 worth of ingredients. Nothing specialty here, all basic food items that you can find in a standard grocery store. And my task is to see how many delicious meals I can create with just these $50 worth of ingredients. Then your job as the judges is to rate my performance on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being absolute trash, you hated everything I made, to 10 being very impressed, even blown away by all of the dishes I put forth in this video. And please do not hold back. I want you to be very honest with your score. Now, if for some reason you want my full grocery breakdown, I've linked it below. So here are the $50 worth of ingredients I chose for this challenge. And one good tip I'll throw out there is when you're doing a challenge like this and you're on a restricted budget, you want to have at least a cuisine in mind that can help guide your recipes, because that way you'll have a lot of crossover with ingredients and you'll have a much easier time using all of your ingredients and not wasting anything, which is the goal here. And I chose Mexican cuisine as just the rough inspiration. Not all of the meals will be Mexican inspired, but a few of the dishes will be. So this is all of the produce right here that I can use today. Here are all of the pantry items. And then finally, my meat, eggs, and dairy are right here. In this budget, I won't be including the pantry staples of oil, salt, and pepper. And I also saved about 50 cents for just some spices, because I definitely wasn't wasting like $5 on a whole thing of cinnamon when I'm just using, say, pennies worth. All right, ground rules done. Let the games begin. I started this challenge off just making a few baked goods right away. One, because they take the longest to make, and also once I have them, they'll set me up for other meals down the line. So I have this single bag of white whole wheat flour. It's 32 ounces or 2 pounds. I'm gonna use about half of it to make an overnight white bread loaf. So I've got 500 grams of flour plus a pinch of yeast, which I'm not including in the cost, just a few cents, and salt and water at about 75% hydration. Water is free. I'll stir that up, and I won't take you through the entire bread making process in detail. I just released an entire video on this. I'm pretty much following my standard sourdough bread making techniques, but everything is just sped up a bit since I'm using baker's yeast and not natural sourdough starter. Once the dough has doubled in size, I'm gonna shape it up. I gave it a dip in some sesame seeds, and I popped the dough in a little bread tin to proof overnight in the fridge. And in the morning, it was nicely puffed up and ready for the oven. I baked it at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for about 35 minutes until it was just perfect. And now that we have white bread, well, there are plenty of options moving forward. So with Mexican cuisine in mind, I wanted to dedicate a lot of this flour to some flour tortillas. I am gonna save about 1 cup of it for a baked good coming up, and the rest will be going to these tortillas, which I used roughly about 3 cups of flour, half a teaspoon of baking powder, a few tablespoons of oil, some warm water, and salt. And I kneaded that dough for around 3 to 4 minutes, adding flour until it felt like a nice soft dough. Kind of like a Play-Doh consistency, maybe slightly softer than that. And once that dough was feeling good, I let it rest for 15 minutes. Then I divided the dough up into little pieces. I shaped those into balls, let those rest for another 15 minutes, and started rolling them out super thin to get them ready for the plancha. Nice. Oh, these flour tortillas are amazing. So by now you know that whenever I'm meal prepping for the week, I'm always making baked goods. It is a staple for my family, and 90% of the time the baked goods have bananas or ripe bananas as the base, which I don't have available in this challenge. So instead, I'm gonna start taking advantage of this butternut squash that I have. So the first thing I did was get it prepped up by peeling off the skin, chopping it in half, and then de-seeding it. Then I took that bottom half where the seeds were, and I sliced that up into a few pieces and got that steaming for around 10 to 15 minutes until it was nice and soft. I added those soft pieces of butternut squash to a mixing bowl. I mashed them up nice and smooth as my base. I added a few scoops of Greek yogurt, 2 eggs, and a little bit of that coconut milk, which I'm gonna start tapping into. Then I added 2 tablespoons of sugar. Again, not on the list, but I wasn't buying a full bag of sugar for this challenge, just to use maybe 15 cents of it. But these muffins needed some additional sweetness outside of the squash. Then I added some lemon zest from my 1 lemon, some rolled oats, and then I ended up using the rest of the flour to get a nice muffin batter. I scooped that into some muffin tins, baked these at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for around 18 to 19 minutes until they read just about 200 degrees internal. Whenever I'm freestyle baking, I always use a thermometer, or you can use the wooden toothpick method, but you gotta check yourself because there's no recipe to go off. And these came out really nice. The butternut squash gave them a very unique flavor that I wasn't used to in a baked good, and they were definitely a big hit at home.
You got your muffin? Do you like?
All right, moving out of baked goods, we've got a nice base there, and I wanted to fry up these plantains. Now, these are sweet plantains. The green ones that you find in the market are the starchier plantains that are good for like a crispy chip. And what I do with these is I twice fry them, or twice air fry them. You save on a ton of oil and you still get a really delicious final product. So I just slice them up into bigger chunks. I get them in the air fryer and just give them a spray, and I threw them in at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for around 8 to 9 minutes to start. And then I leave them right in the air fryer just like this, and I just smush them directly in the air fryer with a fork and then flip them over to give them a spray on the less brown side, and then back in the air fryer at the same temperature for just about 5 more minutes. And these come out nice and golden brown. They're crispy on the exterior, but they're still mushy and sweet and delicious on that interior. And these are a huge hit with my kids. They already love bananas. These are pretty much like fried bananas. Great little side dish, great little snack. I make them all the time.
All right, before I keep cruising on this challenge, I wanted to take a minute to tell you about today's sponsor, which is Thrive Market, which is actually driving a lot of these meals today. Thrive Market is an online membership-based grocery store on a mission to make healthy living easy and affordable for everyone. And I've been shopping with Thrive Market for years now, and there's a few things that keep me coming back. Number one is that you can get everything you need in one place. They have an amazing selection of organic groceries and snacks. They also have a really great selection of non-toxic and organic personal care and beauty items. And I love this experience of being able to shop for all of these things in one place. And orders above $49 ship for free and are delivered in carbon neutral shipping from Thrive's zero waste warehouses. So all of this packaging here gets composted. And I'm a big fan of zero waste. It's kind of the point of this video. So I really appreciate Thrive's mission to become the world's first climate positive grocery store. And there's different price plans for the membership. You can do $12 for a monthly membership or $5 a month for a yearly membership. So if you're interested, click the link below in the description or go to thrivemarket.com/ProHomeCooks for 30% off your first order and a free gift worth up to $60 if you join Thrive Market today.
So I was making a good dent on the ingredients, but then I saw the potatoes and onions just staring at me right on the countertop, and the first thing I thought was Spanish torta, because that dish is the absolute greatest use of potatoes, onions, and eggs, all of which I have in abundance right now. And there's lots of techniques out there for this dish. This is my own personal version that's pretty simple to pull off at home. I started off by slicing up 2 small potatoes very thin, which is important to help them cook quickly and get nice and soft. And then I sliced up some onion, pretty much the same size as the potatoes, and I got a little 8-inch pan on a burner, added a good bit of oil. A traditional recipe uses so much more oil, but then you have to do something with that excess oil. So I'm just doing a little shallow fry here. And I fried these up until they were super soft, which took around 10 minutes. While the potatoes and onions were cooking, I cracked all of my eggs in a bowl and whisked them up.
So the potatoes and onions, pretty nice brown here. They're super soft. I'm just gonna salt them a bit. Give those a mix. I like where that's at. Turn this off. I'm gonna pour off all that excess oil. We don't need that right now. And now we take these warm potatoes, pop the warm potatoes in the cold egg, and just give that a mix. Oop, don't put the pan on there. Idiot. And the warm potatoes start to just lightly set the eggs. Let this sit for like a minute. Clean out the pan, back on the heat, add some of that reserved oil. All right, now eggs back in. Pull in the sides like you're making an omelet. Take my cheese block. I'll grate some cheese. This is optional. Everything's optional, really. All right, so outside is cooked and getting brown. Inside super runny. Gonna take a plate. Here we go. Hope for the best. Okay, that worked. Now we have to just slow lippy dippy back in. Trying to get all that egg. We'll just tuck in those sides, give it a few twirls just to get some even cooking. You want it nice and moist on the inside, like a medium rare steak. That's what we're going for. You don't want to go well done on this. I'm gonna pull it now. Boom. My version of a Spanish torta.
So I was feeling pretty good at this point, but I needed to make a bigger dent in all of these remaining ingredients. So I decided to make a soup. And don't tune out right away when I say soup. Most people think soup is like old people food. But knowing how to make really good soup with proper techniques, I think is mandatory for every home cook, especially in the cold months. So I'm making a crispy beef and butternut squash soup. First, I added some oil to a pot. Then I'm using a little over half of this ground beef. I'll be saving the rest for something else. And I just started rendering that beef down. And while that was cooking, I chopped up my aromatics, which in this case is just carrots, onions, and garlic. Now, most people stop cooking ground beef at this point right here when it's gray and just cook through, because they don't realize that you can get ground beef crispy like a burger. You just gotta keep rendering, keep cooking, and you can develop so much more flavor like at this point right here. When my beef is crispy, I'll scoop that out, leaving the residual oil, get those aromatics in there, and just cook them down until they are nice and soft and sweet. And the base of this soup is gonna be the final two potatoes and almost the rest of that butternut squash. I peeled the potatoes up, chopped them into small cubes, and then chopped up the butternut squash pretty much the same size. And once those aromatics were looking nice and sexy, I added some salt in there, and then in goes the potatoes and the squash. I covered it with water because I didn't have stock, but you can use stock. And then I let that cook until everything was nice and soft. And then this is my favorite technique for soup of all time. It's the ultimate soup hack. I take my immersion blender, you can do this with a regular blender, and I do a half blend. So you get kind of the best of both worlds. You get a little chunky, you get some smooth creamy. I personally love this texture for soup. And after that, all I had to do was add back my beef, a little bit of chopped cilantro, some lemon juice just to kick things up a bit, and then salt and pepper to season. And I served that up with some of the fresh bread, and oh, what a good winter soup this was. All right, next, to balance out these meals, I needed some freshness. So I'm bringing out that cabbage, which is the best budget piece of produce of all time. I'm turning this into a very simple slaw. I make this all the time. I just chopped it in half, razzle-dazzled right through this cabbage, chopped up some cilantro pretty roughly, threw that into a mixing bowl, and then I took a few carrots, peeled those directly into the mixing bowl. And to season, I took 1 clove of garlic, grated that in. I cut 2 wedges of lemon, squeezed those in, a little drizzle of olive oil, seasoned it up with some salt and pepper, and just really gave that a good mix, and boom, you've got a beautiful slaw. Good just to eat like this as a salad or potential tacos. Speaking of tacos, we got the flour tortillas, we got the slaw. I decided to turn the 1 avocado I had into guac. Avocado goes into a bowl. I had about 1/3 of an onion left over. I just diced that up nice and fine, and then I chopped up some cilantro, and I used lemon juice because that's what I had, which I find is still delicious in guac if that's all you have. Don't be reliant on the lime if you don't have it. And then I mashed that up, and boom, there's your guacamole. Now, to round out these tacos, I needed a good filling, and there wasn't a ton of options with what I had left, but I can still get as creative as possible. So I'm using the rest of the ground beef, and I'll just get that in some oil to start rendering off. And to bulk this filling up a little bit, I'm pretty much using all of the produce I have left. So I'm gonna chop up some carrots, chop up the last of my onion, and then 2 cloves of garlic, and just a piece of this cabbage. I don't need to use it all. And then I cooked the ground beef until it was pretty crispy, but everything is going on top of it, so it's gonna continue to cook and get more crispy. Once all the veggies were in there, I seasoned them up with salt, and there was enough residual oil to just cook these down until they were soft and delicious, which took around 5 to 7 minutes. Now, I actually meant to order dried black beans for this challenge, which for me, whenever I'm doing a budget challenge, dried beans just go such a far way. But I ordered these pre-cooked black beans, which cost around $2. So I'm not gonna get as much for my money with these, but it sure was really nice to just pop those right in and be done with it without any soaking and pre-cooking. And I just added a little bit of water on top of this mixture, seasoned it up nicely, and just cooked it down for another few minutes until I had a beautiful taco filling. And let me tell you, these tacos with what I had were absolutely delicious. I need to make flour tortillas more often. That should be a staple, just like bread making in my meal prep. So we've got more ingredients, and I wanted to make a few more breakfast items. So the first thing I did was make a coconut oatmeal. I still had a bunch of the oats left, so I just added those to a saucepan with about 1/3 of the can of coconut milk for flavor, and then the rest was just water. I seasoned that up with some cinnamon, a little bit of vanilla extract, and the smallest hit of salt, and I did give it a little extra sweetness of 2 tablespoons of sugar, and I just cooked down the oats until they were nice and thick, and for me, this is just a family meal prep staple. Now here's a fun breakfast item for you that came about because of the ingredients I had left. Coconut French toast. And I added the final 2 eggs, some of that coconut milk, and again for seasoning, just a little bit of cinnamon and some vanilla extract. I whisked that up, dunked in those beautiful bread slices, and they just soaked up that coconut custard so nicely. And I buttered up a skillet and got those frying off.
White toast.
Everyone loves coconut French toast.
All right, we are down to just these ingredients right here. I've made a pretty good dent, and at this point, this is where all the rules of cooking get thrown out. Well, you still can rely on your technique, but you gotta get creative if you don't wanna waste food, which is the whole point of all of this, really. I hate wasting food, which is why I love these challenges. So the first thing I decided on was taking that tiny bit of yogurt left, adding the rest of my lemon juice. I added a little bit of cilantro and some salt to season. And then I just mixed this up for a nice little zesty yogurt sauce that I actually popped on top of the Spanish torta for a nice little complete breakfast. I almost forgot, I did use a good chunk of that cheese to make some grilled cheese sandwiches for my kids, but I still had a big chunk of that cheese left. So everything else was put into making a mac and cheese for my final dish, since I had that pasta, that penne. And that's the first thing I did. I got a pot of water boiling and I popped in those noodles. I also had a little piece of butternut squash left, and I threw that in with the noodles to boil together to add some extra flavor and just bulk things up a bit. I got some garlic cooking away in some olive oil, and I added on about 2 tablespoons of flour, and I was very disappointed at this point that I didn't save just a tablespoon or 2 of flour to make a roux for this cheese sauce. Everything would have just worked out so perfectly, but I had to bring in the backup. And I cooked down that flour in the oil for about 2 minutes. And then in went the rest of the coconut milk, along with some water to get that perfect consistency, which I heated up to get it nice and thick. And then I seasoned this up and grated the rest of that cheese, and that went right into the sauce to melt down. And then when the pasta and squash was done cooking, I added on that cheese sauce, mixed everything up, and then check this out. I took my final garlic clove, final bit of fresh cilantro, and my final bread slice. I threw that into a food processor until it created a breadcrumb. Got that frying off in a little bit of olive oil just to start that crispiness process. And then top this mac and cheese with a garlic cilantro breadcrumb. Bake that off in the oven at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for about 15 minutes. And oh baby, this came out so much better than I could have ever expected. I am not lying. Usually these final dishes you make with just random ingredients in your house are like, you know, 6, 7 out of 10, which is fine. The goal is to use up the ingredients, but this is a whole new creation that is unbelievable. So that is it. I used every single ingredient except this 1/3 of cabbage I have left. I'm just gonna feed it to the chickens. Give them a little treat. And now's your chance to let me know how I did below in the comments, 1 to 10. Be as honest as possible. And maybe this has inspired you to try your own $50 challenge. I love doing cooking challenges. The first one I ever did on this channel was many years ago. It was a clear my fridge out challenge, and it completely reframed my mindset in the kitchen to the point where I started getting excited for when ingredients dwindled down and I had to get creative, because that's where some of the best dishes come out of.